let me take a moment to tell you a little bit about them, and I'll read them in order of their appearance this afternoon. Tina Barr. Tina Barr's book of poems, Pink Moon, has just been released as the inaugural winner of the Editor's Choice Award from Jacar Press. Congratulations, Tina. Tina's previous books include Green Target, which is winner of the Barrow Street Press Poetry Prize, and the Brockman-Campbell Award. The Gathering Eye, winner of the Tupelo Press Editors Award, and Kaleidoscope. Tina's received fellowships from the NEA, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts and the MacDowell Colony. Then next will be, so we'll have no interruptions in the flow of reading, Catherine Carter. Catherine's poetry collections include Larvae of the Nearest Star, The Swamp Monster at Home, The Memory of Gills, all of these published with LSU Press, and the chapbooks, Marks of the Witch and Good Morning Unseen with Jacar Press. Also, her work has appeared in the Best American Poetry, Ploughshares, RHINO, and North American Review. Catherine is a professor of English at Western Carolina University, where she works in teacher preparation. And written like a true poet, I have here, on a good day, she can requeen a hive of honeybees and roll a whitewater kayak. On less good days, she collects stings, rock rash, and multiple contusions. Well crafted. And then Jane Craven. Jane Craven's poems have appeared in the Southern Review, Plume, Tar River Poetry, and the Atlanta Review, just to name a few journals. She earned a BA in English from UNC Chapel Hill and an MFA in creative writing poetry from, looking over, North Carolina State University. Her collection, My Bright Last Country, won the Vern Rutzala Poetry Prize and was published by Cloud Bank Books in 2020. Her book, Radiant City, won the Jacar Press Full-Length Book Award and was published in 2023. It's a pleasure to have you all here and to begin with Tina Barr.
Okay, now I'm gonna wrestle with the.
I'll wrestle.
How's this? Is this good?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Good?
Yeah, just feel like I can't ever move away from it. But I won't talk about my experiences with microphones. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really glad to see so many faces of people that I love. So, and I just want to thank Malaprops, Patricia and Stephanie, for all the work that they did, which is, I don't think I could do it, but anyway. I'm going to read for about 20 minutes. I'm going to read 5 poems. So that way you can count down and you know when I'm close. The first poem begins with a snake, and it takes place partly in Memphis, Tennessee, where I lived for 13 years, I guess. And as y'all know, I'm a thief. I steal other people's stories, but I always change their names. So this is a story that's embedded that was told to me by a friend of mine. And also, they're already manufacturing like robot dogs, robo dogs. Do y'all know this? And when you look online, you can see for the big company in Boston that's producing these, there's a little innocuous video of like robots that look right out of Star Wars, the bad guys, and the dogs, and they're all doing like the mashed potato, like this. So you think, oh, you know, how wonderful, you know, and but they're designed to kill people. So yeah, the robot dogs can fire, and they can They can sense heartbeat and breath. So even in our cabin on the mountain, we would not be safe. But anyway, okay, so this poem is called Deployed. His length splayed on the trail's black bottom. He turned, opened his mouth, white inside, cotton mouth. My friends who grew up in Memphis said he'd track, come after, so we backed away. At lunch, Shelby tells me her mother died when she was 21, father gone. In the living room, a cop, her uncle, and a lawyer who slid a piece of paper across the coffee table. She didn't know what she'd signed. 10 years later, she tracked down the officer who'd been called to the house. I remember, he said into the phone, she was murdered. Shelby went to Memphis, but when he'd sat down across a coffee, the cop denied it. We all learned to spell Mississippi before we left second grade, that rhythm in 3 segments of sound. The river I rollerbladed beside, so swollen, trunks were 5 feet deep in it, but in spring, white filaments, tufts banked its slope, cottonwood. Another name I read before I saw it, like cottonmouth. What came out of the cop's mouth was padded in lies. Shelby'd signed away the state's request for an autopsy. My pet boa, Artemis, never hissed, just lunged from her tank at my hand, left the imprint of tiny teeth, a bruise in the fat pad at my thumb's base. In Libya, we've already tested robo-dogs on spiky feet, roughly the shape a kid would make from an erector set. Spot can trot in packs, sensors attuned to hearts pumping, breath. A warm yellow, 4 legs, body, an upright head, armed, ready to take aim. For police units, they're Superman blue. This next poem is really fun for me to read because I have chronic fatigue syndrome, which has been a state secret for years. But I got it 30 or 40 years ago, but only in my 60s did it really begin to amplify itself. So it's like long haul COVID, it's a post-viral or viral illness. But I feel like because people know what long haul COVID is, hallelujah to my friend over there, I feel like I can talk about chronic fatigue syndrome and people won't think that I'm just, in my bed with laudanum feeling faint or something. So this poem discloses the reality of this illness. And let's see, in this book, I use the trope of chess. And also, since this is Asheville, so we know you're a really cultivated audience, you probably all know what Greek red-figured amphora are, Greek red-figured vases that were made back at the height of the Greek civilization. They're red-figured Greek, they're white-figured, they're different kinds. But anyway, when I was 14, having always been fascinated with mythology, I decided that for my 2-week senior project, I was going to make a Greek red-figured vase. So that's sort of like me telling you I'm going to build the bookstore or something. I mean, completely incapable. But I did make a bunch of squat pots on a wheel, which turned into decent paperweights. So this poem is called The Gamble. In the sixth game of his match against Spassky, Fisher made his move, Queen's Gambit. Cold, hyper vigilant. This was years after age 13. He had sacrificed his queen in a game of the century. At an IQ of 180, frightened, he lived inside his head. Eidetic image, second nature, playing steps ahead. His imagined pawns, rooks, bishops, all threats slid in for the kill. At 14, I tried to make a Greek red-figured vase, spun globs of flecked clay to heavy paperweights, but read about red-figured, black-figured, incised, two-handled vessels. Perseus, Hercules, helmeted like pileated woodpeckers, launched spears, wielded shields. The cloaked Spartan boy, rather than flinch, let a fox eat his innards. Fisher's fox leapt and circled in his brain. My queens are syringes of red liquid, a concentrate of B12. My rooks, derivatives of pig's liver, brain, heart in emu oil, liquid from crushed aronia berry, powdered French oak in capsules. Many little pawns I swallow to sleep. The king, my body. An invisible virus has an end game. A doe slips downhill, ears, pointed nose, hide gray as tree bark. She sidesteps any stalker, becomes invisible to me, not prey, grace. Okay. Some of you know that I have sort of peculiar interests. So this is a poem about sharks. And I don't think it needs any explanation other than knowing, which you all know, that I live in a cabin with the guy in the orange shirt on a mountain in Black Mountain. So this poem, I could go on and on about him. This poem is called Deep. Outside, the call is a caw, deep in a throat, a gurgle curled round the sound. It's no barn owl, but a bobcat beyond the shed in woods close in, a raking scream. Like fate knocking in Beethoven's Fifth, a sound like no other. The chill of my sister's necrotizing heart, her words blistered, dry as the scar on my back, years old. Crocodiles, once they have you by the arm or leg, pull to the bottom, sunk there, take you on a death roll, over and over, the air bubbled up, your flesh ragged. Before dinosaurs, sharks the size of a bus, double-fanged teeth, piles of teeth like shells on a beach in Fisher Branch, Virginia. A megalodon's tooth is 7 inches wide and high, the size of a big man's hand. Its jaw the size of an old Volkswagen. Its doorway of teeth could crush 6 men at once. These days, our sharks shed teeth every 2 weeks, press forward. So ones in the front lodge in surfboards, skin. But whale sharks the huge polka-dotted mammoths float open-mouthed for plankton they sieve. One could pet them. They give birth to 300 live babies. Laid out, these bundles in a Japanese fishery. We kill sharks for soup, netted, cut off the fins, wounded, thrown back alive. Angel sharks are shaped fans like a monk's shawl. Tiny lengths like string confetti trail either side of its mouth, attract fish. Sharks are immune to cancer. You know we'll harvest their cells. All right, this one it's kind of fun for me to read this one because I think it's called Casting Shade on Bezos. Anyway, even though I use Amazon all the time. And the Latin title gets translated inside the poem. Last summer, I guess it was, I found a wasp nest inside the car door. And the poem talks about those trips into space, and also the poem ends up in Switzerland. Okay. And you all know me well enough to know that I talk in those kind of tangents, which is how the poems end up like this. Gradatum ferociter. Wasps pulse over combs' hexagonal cells, hidden in the crevasse where the car's door shuts. Pressed together, the empty host of combs is like stuffing Amazon might use to pack. Bezos will take the blue Origin rocket into space, paid for by our orders and the Pentagon. He's climbed step by step ferociously. Eventually, we'll all be able to go 10 minutes for $500,000. Once at our cabin, hail the size of ice cubes spilled on grass. NASA's found Greenland's glaciers melt from beneath, cut like sugarcane. The seas will rise along coasts 16 inches by the time a child born today is 80. Crocodile bags can cost more than a space flight. In 1975, La Donna, an actress from Mexico, trailed a croc into Cartier. So they made her a necklace. 2 crocs hinged at their tails like Siamese twins. Their heads rested on her chest, scaled with emeralds, rubies in their eyes. Ferocious, not friendly, as the settlers who gave tribes wool coverlets taken off those dead from smallpox. For some, gold is poetry. The mistress of an old boyfriend's banker at her chalet west of Geneva had basketfuls, Bulgari, Bucciolati. Bezos wants colonies, will live in pockets on space modules, but Bezos is no Bach. Okay, and then this last poem is a little bit longer, but we'll get through it. It's fun for me because it's set in this area, and some of you know from my book Green Target that there's a character named Farley. He's a woodsman, and I steal his stories all the time. He's like right out of Faulkner. He only wears camo. He can climb a 60 or 100-foot poplar holding a chainsaw in one hand and like climbing with the other. So he tells me stories, and there's another, his real name is not actually Farley, but I think I was looking for like Southern names for men, and that's what I came up with. There's another character in this poem, and his pseudonym is Lamar. And let's see. Okay. El Dorado. Farley says, a wagon load of gold stolen between Old Fort and the federal building in Asheville is buried somewhere between the two, maybe on the mountain behind Wendy's. Old Doc Dickerson's driveway had a circle in its center, the graves of babies. Hordes of trash buried all over these mountains. Old bottles, 2 Confederate graves, 144 buried building the railroad. Farley thinks between the watershed and Reams Creek are buried Zebulon Vance's gold-laced dishes, like doilies of gold laid over glass. Zebulon, born in a Reams Creek cabin, his father ran a provision stand for drovers moving hogs on the turnpike. Penniless, except they had 18 slaves. On a loan, Zeb earned a law degree, went to court on horseback, carried in his saddlebags a fresh shirt. Vance in Congress said that for the slave, that is his normal condition. After our state seceded, he raised a company, the Rough and Ready, nearly drowned swimming Bryce's Creek to get boats for his men. They made him governor. He sold salt so people preserved meat, used blockade runners to send North Carolina cotton over the sea, kept the mills open. He may have been KKK's Grand Dragon. In Ashe County is a mine, now closed over, where lawmen from 5 counties dumped bodies. Farley knows of a hooker. They used her, caught her drug dealer, rolled them down the shaft in the 70s. When he married, Vance enslaved 6 people at his house in Asheville. Lamar told me 5 years after how he'd been picked up, stopped at night in Phillipstown, shaky from heart medicine, in a bar for the men's room, beaten, taken, pleaded, served 8 months. He had letters from Wynton Marsalis, but the judge said, I don't believe you're a musician. And the cop, I'm gonna ruin your life. Lamar's voice is a thunderbolt, gold, out of his barrel chest. He's no taller than a music stand, his people out of Trinidad. Last night, pinks, like split pulp of blood oranges, ignited the borders of black ridgeline, clouds the wet, vulval inside of conch shells, webbed like pulled cotton, a leakage of corals, yellows, golds. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome, of course. Get comfortable for you.
That should be good.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
I also have thanks for Patricia and Stephanie and Katie. We appreciate your hosting us, and I do appreciate your all coming out, especially when the weather is this nice. It's more of a sacrifice. I will begin with one from my first book, known familiarly as the Pink Book. That is called The Memory of Gills, and perhaps we have gardeners among us. Gardeners, yeah. It is lettuce season, and I have 24 lettuces going gangbusters. And I'm very partial to lettuce, but as I think we know, the lettuce does not stay in that sort of tender and succulent state very long. Then it bolts and it becomes bitter. And this is a meditation on lettuce, which kind of focuses on this very natural habit of the lettuce, which is nonetheless very inconvenient for us. The lettuce does not want to be the lettuce we know, succulent, riffle-edged, green to the tongue, moist and fresh as the cheek of a child. The lettuce wants more. That stalk cries out to stretch, to lengthen into a tower, a scepter, a spurt of flowers, a spatter of seeds. Its humid leaves yearn to turn to thorny spears, jagged blades. It thinks, if lettuce can think, of the day it will have met its purpose and can stand emptied out, withering, desiccated, fulfilled. But I will not have it. Brutal knife in hand, I take to the garden. I snick off the full, heavy stalk. I demand a head. I thwart the lettuce in its climb to power and peace. I insist that it remain full, potential, a Lolita of lettuces. Turgid, prepubescent, delicious. Let us be forgiven our hunger, our lust, out of which, lettuce, I have sinned against you. Salad for dinner. The second poem comes from my most recent collection, Larvae of the Nearest Stars. And it is called Seining the Parking Lot. And seining, as I'm sure many of you know, refers to a particular kind of netting. You have many yards of small mesh kind of extended between two poles, and one person holds the pole at the shoreline while the other one scoots it along the ground and gathers up what is out there. And if you are so minded, down in Flatland, where I came from up on the eastern shore of Maryland, you can go seine a parking lot when there is floodwater, which is how we came to be seining a parking lot. And very, very strange things come up in the net. So this is seining the parking lot. After rushing rains, the long arch of bridge leans from land to water, and the parking lot, which is also the fairground, lifts its skeletal Ferris wheel from a hip-deep lake. River current plunges through before eddying and purling back to the deep channel, carrying bright perch, smooth pewter eels, the bones of the drowned. Down in that lake, two people joined by 30 feet of seine, tiny squares of net slung between two poles, fishing for brown gold carp. No carp have swum in with the torrent, but everything else comes up. As the net's folds and curtains sieve through the scurrying grass shrimp, transparent as animate water, silver sides that quiver and flash and flee, beer cans, jagged, innocent tin razors, roseate grains of barnacles clamped by their calcium foreheads to the glassy elvers of the Chesapeake sea serpent, and condoms rinsed of any freight of joy or shame, split now to admit the passage of squirming fingerling mermaids, or a glittering lively handful of what at first could well be bioluminescent copepods, but which, seen close, reveal themselves to be the sparkling larvae of the nearest stars. And that is us too, of course. We are also larvae of the nearest stars. As Carl Sagan says, we are star stuff. This is my second book, The Swamp Monster at Home. People keep asking me if that's my husband. It is not. I have a kind of a sympathy for vegetative monsters. There's a poem in there that has a swamp monster. But this one is also set in Maryland, Eastern Shore of Maryland, where I grew up. And it is, if any of you are maybe not from around here, I expect this may speak to you. I too am not from around here, and I could live here a very long time and I would still never be from around here. And if I had children, they would not be from around here. And it complicates your interactions with the community if you are not from around here. So this is called The People She Knows. She says she knows so few. Though she's lived here 50 years, no one wants to level or paint or rewire the walls. She's not from around here. But take her walking, all that changes. The oak with no new growth. What's wrong, she asks it. Come on, she pleads. Don't ask whether it tells her or how. Crossing the sparkling thread of line ditch, she holds a muscled ironwood bowl, which steadies her like a human arm. The frogs in the little marsh had names, so had the water snake, who ate them all and was not blamed. The Sybil tree frog calls, forecasting, she says, rain at last. When we lay her under the sand, here will be all around her, all the people she knows, the thin roots bringing back the deep dirt lightward, the black blot of buzzard poised to offer transformation, the whispered, crumbly words of worm. So there are perhaps other ways to get to know people. For these final two, I will turn to the chapbook, Good Morning Unseen. And that is kind of the theme of the book, is all the things we don't see and perhaps could. And this one, this is about gladness, happiness, which kind of comes and goes at its free will. And I have, for the period of the poem, connected gladness to a cat I used to have, a black and white cat called Orca. And at the time I let the cat roam. I don't do that anymore. But so there's also a cat story here. And this is called Missing, Presumed Eaten. Glad is tricky. Pause too long at the door and it's run off like your old cat, gone to snarl and gnaw at someone else's joy, to make up to the fetching tortoiseshell delight next door. And all at once it's been gone for hours, missed dinner. And you remember the shriek that morning and then the silence slick with dread. And you know, you may never be glad again. Glad is the cat in coyote country, missing, presumed eaten. After a day you give up on it, tell yourself while you weep that your black and white tuxedo gladness was fat, sweet. Maybe the coyote world needed a meal. You were lucky to keep it as long as you did. And if, under your blank window in the cold dawn, you hear it suddenly wail your secret name as though it had never left, that's when you know its tricky ways best. Glad is yowling, purring, black and white, fugacious, chewed and clawed by all that wants and hates glad, the hungry world that one more time it just escaped. May you have gladness, also cats. And I will finish up. There is a poem in this book called The Unseen Says, so it's a persona poem. This is what I imagine the unseen saying to us. From the magnolia, I wave to you through the wind. my dark leaves quivering in the glitter of winter sun, though I knew you would not see. As the dog, I rest my chin on your bed, tell you it's safe to wake, as you shudder with the fear and despair you clutch so close. Under your feet, as the dirt, I bear you up. As the air without which you cannot live 200 seconds, I lift your ribs again, 700 million times, never wearying until you do. As the sunlight, I fuse myself into wood, bursting forth again in flame. As the rain, I show you safe passage, falling, seeping, leaping through myself, the clouds, and the sea. As you breathe, as you drink, as you stretch cramped hands to my electric coil, toast me in the bread, you ask whether I'm even here, or forget to ask. Refugee on the long road, back bent with the treasures you lug, the fears you haul, lay down the weighted silver, your grandparents' plate and grief, let home evaporate behind you, unbind the albatross corpse festering your neck. Set it all down, be free of it, and take my hand in yours. With a second hand and a third, I pipe for you now. Just for a moment, dance. Thank you so much.
That's good. Just a little bit. Glasses on. Yeah, they're good. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you to the staff at Malaprops. They are super competent. I was really impressed, and they're also super kind. So thank you. And thank you to Tina and Kathy, who I've just met, new friends, new poet friends. I'm an environmental poet, which I think most poets are, but that's the best way I know to describe my work. And it deals with humans in landscapes, moving through built environments, with a little bit of romanticism, I guess, thrown in. This first poem is called Equinox. The swirling eye of August, silent at its center, contains whole flocks of birds, unaware their diminished world is being carried out to sea. Today, an insect brushed my elbow. I could tell it was a locust by the dry fluttering. There is the apple, and there is everything beyond it. Orchards from another time, their forgotten bounty spilling to the ground, bruised with the low hum of yellow jackets. I consider the world's rotation, its orderly, unvaried tipping into shadow. Soon the harvest air will burn through our lungs, sparking a dry flutter of happiness, of desire. I want to do it again. I want to abandon this tidy life, fly into someone's arms. How sweet it was to surrender, to fall uncontrollably in cities among shards of light, and in towns the color of honey and coral. I live in Wilmington now. I'm originally from Raleigh, but I'm really inspired by the marshes in Wilmington, those wonderful long drives across bridges in eastern North Carolina. This poem is called Incidental. The marsh grass stretching beneath the long bridge is incidental. How it carves the waterway into puzzle pieces on and on, flattening at the horizon. Water is consequential, the way it underpins the scene and would exist without the dry grass and its blaze,
The difference between the incidental and the consequential is a history of disappearance. If the grass goes, the water stays. A bird left an imprint of itself on my living room window. The oil of its feathers formed a perfect breast, 2 wings and a headlong beak. I searched the ground below for the body, but it was only the image that was incidental. The subjects of Aiken's portraits look old, no matter their age. Their rheumy eyes are open windows to suffering. For me, their utter joylessness is consequential and says that life will break your heart. I drive to the ocean. My heart is of consequence. It beats inside a car, crossing a bridge at sunset, salt in the water, and also the air. Okay, here's a human and a couple of humans in a landscape. Not those humans. Those humans come later. Vacation, 10 p.m. How many of you are familiar with the Blockade Runner down on the coast? Really nice hotel on the ocean. Vacation, 10 p.m. The space shuttle arcs eternity's dark fiction. A balcony, a father watches his girl on Earth swim east to west, the hotel pool, mermaid tail, diaphanous comet, this finned beast, aluminum gleam, blink, blink. Okay. For these next couple of poems, I'm going to go to my first book, which is My Bright Last Country. One is about my mother, and the other is about my father. And I think most people spend their whole lives trying to figure out their parents. I'm no different. Yep. About my father. It's called the Sketchbooks of Hiroshige. 2 figures, brushstrokes on the horizon, cross the midline of the page. The caption tells me they approached the Tokaido Road, one of the 5 highways of ancient Japan, with their burden of silk, a stunned cock, a few baskets of grain. In the sky, birds are far off flicks of the wrist, tufts of inky grass like razor cuts into the narrow whiteness of foreground. My father walked to work in the fullness of such empty space. The 5 miles he covered in brogans, felt hat, a raincoat he draped over one arm when the sun shone hard. Eyes down, he'd crunch along the gravel shoulder, past the old grist mill, its grindstone fallen to cantilevered rest on the creek's granite floor. The whole apparatus built on a fault line, waterfalls still plunging from one sheared off rock face to another. He walked to lose weight after a heart attack bowed him to the living room floor beneath a framed print of Van Gogh's wheat fields. Ragged crows, troubled skies, his suicide painting, some say. The trees knuckling under in the wind, parted fields waving violently, hapless and golden. It is not hard to imagine my father so long ago, deep in his people's unforgiving mountains, a tiny figure in an unfolding scroll, a beaten child on a dirt road, trying to choose between a storm and home. And he was from Asheville.
Wow.
Born and raised in Asheville. These were his mountains. My mother is Aria. She was tragic and unaware of tragedy, knew only the maze of the facility in which she was entombed, wandering, her head heavy and foreign. The world became a shivering thing, tree line vibrating against the sky, emerging bruise of sunlight. She knew not the splendid crevasse that peeled open in her brain, river of fire, this wasting, this new world so absent the other world, with its dead endings, fresh murals on condemned buildings. I remember when she was whole, long drives in the country, dirt roads then. On a hot summer day, we stopped at a sandy tobacco field where a farmer had assembled sharecropper shacks in the false shape of a village. They were full of teak clocks, and a loud off-kilter wind of tick-tocks startled as we opened each door. I watched as she delicately, with both hands, fed a giant sun-like disc into a music box that plucked out Lucia del Mar with its metal teeth. Sishrita el ciel per me, heaven opens for me, sings of flowers, a screen door swings wide. Okay. So the couple in this poem may or may not have taken hallucinogens. Dance, harvest. Stars hen scratch the sky, and my garden is hologram hazy, each curve of each object, a rounded spectrum where there's no substrate, no layer of dying leaves, only tree trunks grown indistinct as ancestors. It's of little use to weed when the plot cuts in and out and has not been a story about dirt or worms for a long time. Even those velvet bodies we've moved against on indolent afternoons, marked with our sweat and our perfume, they too shimmer, collapse like quasars as we turn through the high stalks, rows spiked for miles with corn silk and moonflower, translucent, mute. The next two poems are very short. I guess they're like little vignettes, and I always wonder what it must have been like to live, of course, in a different century. I think everybody wonders this. Some people go out and become Civil War reenactors. I just kind of think what it must have been like for a girl to land on these shores or to be raised in a 19th century household. So this first one's called Early American Diorama. Lifted into a rocking skiff, dropped wading against high waves, cold salt, one precious shoe sucked into sand. On the first landed night, I dreamt I was skating on black ocean, wearing blades my father carved of bone, while beneath the scarred ice, birds flew in unbroken formation. Some of us numbed our way through winter, lasted long enough for rigid exploration of Scrub Oak's coast. I stayed with the others, wind stilled, looking skyward, metal stars spinning by their threads. Barn. Night calls and swallows fly from every crevice of the boarded up world. Here is where sorrow hung from the rafters among the cured leaves that settled like the thinnest suede in our palms. Here baying dogs echoed through the rampant fields, human scent drowned by bright leaf, briefly. Scrape the mud from your boots. Press a weary ear to my Victorian breast. Close your eyes. Even now, there are lights in the river. My last poem is the title poem from Radiant City. Back when garbage trucks squeezed their sweet juice onto the street like giant pissing animals, I got a job as a cocktail waitress at a midtown hotel. First day after my shift, the union steward met me at my locker, asked for $25 in dues. She had a broken arm. I didn't know what a union was, but I paid her cash for my tips. My uniform was a demure bow-tied blouse and ankle-length wraparound skirt designed to open as you walk. The lobby bar was hushed, the kitchen riotous and steamy with a gauntlet of ass-grabbing busboys, snarling line cooks in a chain-link liquor cage, holding a single blood-faced Irish barman. I lived with a friend of a friend in a basement apartment in Chelsea. My room had parquet floors, a small beige filing cabinet, and a futon on which I remember reading Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain. I measured time at the novel's pace, which was languorous. Between its yellow covers were the snowy Alps, Europe before the Great War, a tuberculosis sanatorium with its flushed and deathly erotic inmates. My roommate was a photographer for Blue Boy magazine. Early on, he explained that I would have to find something to do outside the apartment on Wednesday nights because that was his studio time. Thursday mornings, various leather accoutrements would hang in the shower. I didn't understand his world, but he seemed to approach things with a focused outlook. And I like that about him. 1980, I hope he made it. During the transit strike, only the cabbies were running. They had business to burn, and one driver let me and 3 strangers pile in the back seat of his cab on a sunstruck and blooming spring day. I can't get no satisfaction blasted from the cab's open windows as we sped through Central Park. I didn't know it then, but I was making my way to you. Our first date was years later in the city, and we kissed under a streetlight at the corner of 23rd and 3rd near my old apartment. Your young stubble stung my lips that frigid January evening, and I was so goddamned happy. The streetlight's glow flooded the whole island in a sputtering incandescence that flowed down alleyways, flamed the hems of winter coats, rose slowly to the tip of every skyscraper, and did not stop. Thank you.